Hello, this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about a little bit about Hunter being indicted on his federal gun charges, and they're not charging him thus far with taxes and the far violations and other things that could blow back on Joe Biden. So, but even still, the mainstream media and Democrats are crying about it, and you can't be all guns are bad, and then be like, oh, but Hunter Biden, it's he shouldn't be go to jail for lying on an ATF form. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But there's other things that obviously that they could blatantly indict him on, and we'll see if they end up doing it. Of course, they tried to get him off easy on the sweetheart deal that totally blew up. Also want to talk about President Donald Trump and in his interview with Megyn Kelly. And it's funny reactions from there's some anti-Trump. I don't even know if it's fair to call them anti-Trump people, but there's people who are just kind of over Trump and are like in the DeSantis camp or other camps or whatever, and are just like, oh, this was such a terrible interview for him. He totally bombed it or whatever. They're like, oh, look at all the MAGA people. They're not even saying nothing. They're just being quiet, or some of them are spinning stuff, but they're mostly quiet because I know it was so bad. And I don't have that perception. Um, I think there's certainly some things in the interview that I didn't like. That I'm like, okay, well, he's not telling the truth there. But I think watching it, he still is as charismatic as ever. And I think it was actually a pretty good interview for him, like, or at least it was okay. Um Again, there's a lot of things to harp on, but unless you're kind of already in that I'm nitpicking, I'm done with him kind of camp, I don't know how this is like a significantly awful interview for him. In my humble opinion, you guys can let me know what you think as we watch some of it together. We're not going to watch the whole thing because it's like about 100 minutes, but so I'd encourage you guys to go ahead and watch it all yourselves with the Megyn Kelly interview that he had. But it was interesting. I watched it last night. Thank you guys for being in the chat today, and thank you guys for watching live. Thank you guys for those of you who watch it back later, the program. I thank you guys. If you guys would like to support, you guys can go to blacktnews.com/donate and participate there in that kind of way. I thank you guys for watching, but if you want to go that extra mile and actually support financially, I'd appreciate it. You guys were some of you might have been here with me live as my webcam died out, and I'm using the one that's like right from my computer, but I had one that was a bit better, and I get that replaced. So it's you get a little more flexible options when it's an external you know camera. So anyway, there's different needs that we have at Black Tea News, and of course across the stream and around my website and all that stuff. So if you guys can go the extra mile, there's a link in the comments, in the description. If you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, if you guys want to send super chats, you guys can do that on YouTube. On Facebook, you guys can send stars. So just want to keep that in mind. The Bible says you have not because you ask not. So occasionally I do ask. Also check out different merchandise that we have at blacktnews.com. We have, make crack whack again, Trump 24 shirt. We got different gender apparel, like the XX woman or Club XX. I've got that Club XX t-shirt in pink. The hoodie looks really cute. In my opinion, I think I'm gonna get the hoodie too, but got some pro-life merch and other stuff as well that you guys can get, like the black tea mugs and other kind of mugs as well. Also check out different books you guys can read. I have over 17 books that are published. 2 are nonfiction, the rest are fiction, ranging from like children's chapter books to like new adult, contemporary fantasy, historical fiction, fantasy, paranormal romance. I just write whatever is kind of on my mind and let my imagination kind of run wild. But the important book that I talk a lot about is my book, of course, Guys Blatantly Against Abortion. That's available on Amazon and also Barnes and Noble. So it talks about, rights. It talks about theology, of course, but it also talks about philosophy and other things as well. And, I was in a live. I wasn't in a live. I was watching a live on TikTok the other day. For some time, it's one of my mutuals who was hosting the debate, and I was here listening for a long time, and people just had the craziest stances. And yes, people were advocating that yes, abortion should be legal up until the moment of birth, even if the baby's outside of the uterus and the umbilical cord is still attached. And people will say that just because they believe in that principle. But they'll be like, no one literally does that. And just like, bro, people are throwing their babies in dumpsters, or someone they got to say, like, what if the pinky toe is still in her womb? Can you still kill the baby? She's like, yes. The umbilical cord still attached. Like, yeah. What if the placenta is still in the womb? Like, yes. Like, and they're like, are you bad faith or do you mean this? And she starts laughing, and she's like, the reason why I'm just saying all this stuff is because, well, she believes women should be able to legally be able to do that. But she's like, if a woman is in that position where the baby is viable, they would just push it out, they would just induce. And I'm just like, man, she really has no idea, because women do abort babies that are viable. So it's just a disconnect from reality. But someone did come on the live, and after they'd all been talking for a while, nobody brought up religion, and then someone asked, like, are you guys have this opinion because of religion? And I know and one of them was just like, I'm agnostic. And I know the person who's hosting the live is religious. And but that's not, she's like, we can talk about that if that's what you want to talk about, but I'd rather just, stick to what the reason why you're pro-choice, and a, debate off of that and not get into theology. So regardless of if you're pro-life or not, I mean, if you're religious and you're pro-life, you could be an atheist, you could be agnostic, you could be pagan, you know people will still accuse you. Someone came at me for being pro-life and Christian, and I brought up secular pro-life. They're a really good organization, and they still went to their site and checked them out, and they're like, oh, they believe that um it's a baby, so yeah, that's that they're pro-life. They're actually Christian. I'm like, what the heck? So I think they called it a child, or I don't even know if they called it a child. What exactly was the term that set them off? But they were mad that I called it a child. And they said they were human. And I'm like, well, what species is it? Like, if a woman is pregnant, a human woman is pregnant, I'm like, what species is it? And then they just tried to like derail the conversation. I'm like, I can't even talk to you if you can't admit like a super simple question. And they just tried to go off on like, you called it a child, and so I posted a definition. I'm like, yeah, it is a child technically. Like, when my sister's pregnant right now, the doctors don't call it it is a fetus, but her daughter's a fetus, but nobody calls it a fetus. They call it her baby, she, she's pronouns and everything. So, um, I have ample, experience talking to people about these things. So I one of the reasons that it's made a lot of my arguments pretty strong, I guess. But I know sometimes you got people think that, I don't know, I make it people up. But I don't. People are actually crazy. Oh, I do have a super chat. Let me go ahead and shout that out before I get into the news of the day. Thank you very much. Uh Shantae Holmes, thank you very much. Appreciate that. That is so appreciated. Thank you very much. Um, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Hunter, but it's funny. No, he got indicted for the gun charge, and you know that he had a deal, sweetheart. I think the plea and the deal I just kind of fused together. That's why I said that weird. But he had a sweetheart plea deal agreement where he was basically going to get immunity for his stuff. The gun charge was just going to fall off. Now I've harped on the gun. A lot of people haven't harped on the gun charge as much as I've harped on the gun charge, because I feel like Joe Biden has literally got up and said speeches where your rights aren't absolute, the amendments aren't absolute. I actually did a pretty funny TikTok because of what he said. If you've seen like the slavery one that I did, where it's like the 14th Amendment, he's like, "You're right. None of them's absolute." And then it's just like all these flashbacks of slavery and different stuff, overlays of things that Joe Biden has said. So you guys can find that back in my archive or whatever. But um, that's where that came from. He said our no amendment is absolute. So he was talking about the Second Amendment. So you can put all these restrictions and other stuff on there. So he's done executive orders. He's made a lot of speeches. Kamala Harris, when she was running, she talked about doing sweeping things via executive order. And Joe Biden was like, "You can't do everything by executive order." And she laughed at him, like literally laughed at the man. And he still picked her as a VP. And then he's making crazy legislation by executive order. Probably not as bad as she wants to do. She'll be worse, I guess, if she gets in. But he keeps pushing it, and so he's very much in for going after your Second Amendment rights. And they signed a bipartisan bill. Was that last year? I think it was last year. I don't think it was this year. But it could have been this year. And when that, by the way, people were concerned about red flag laws and other things in their bipartisan gun legislation. And something that they did decide to do after that was signed, because of the law, they decided to start taking away funding from different schools that had like different I guess archery and shooting other things like that. So they're taking away funding from schools if they have that kind of stuff. So we'll have to go into it a deeper time, but I haven't seen many people talk about that, and I was so annoyed because Republicans were acting like nothing would happen, and Biden and the Democrats are already using it to strip funds away from schools. So anyway, he wants to pass more gun legislation, and they want all these universal background checks and other things like that. And they have all this bravado that they want to do. But I'm like, if you want to keep making more laws, it doesn't make sense if you don't want to follow the laws that are already on the book. So it's a very clear cut, open shut case of Hunter Biden lied on an ATF form because he marked that that he wasn't, on different drugs and stuff. And in his memoir, it's one thing to do it, right? He did it. He lied on a form, and we all know he lied in his form because in his memoir he writes about all these crazy things that he did on drugs. So I hope the buck was worth it, but he put all his confessions in a book, and it's clearly, he's going through with his drugs at a time where not only gets the gun, gets possession of the gun. He's with his brother's widow, by the way. And she felt uncomfortable with him having the gun or whatever, and then it ends up getting thrown out near a school. So if there's recklessness of the gun, so he's already broken a felony. And not only do they, want people to it'd be harder for people to get guns, they also want to make all these restrictions on your lock boxes and other stuff like that. So this is an individual who obviously was not responsible with his firearm, just not responsible, period. So you can't be Joe Biden and the Democrats and be so strict on guns and then be upset when it's like, oh, let's follow the laws on the books. Now it's going to be really funny when Hunter Biden and his team are like, this is violating his Second Amendment rights, and these different laws shouldn't exist. And I'm sure they'll go all kinds of different routes. I think based on some reporting with Hunter, it seems like they're willing to embarrass Joe if they need to get, because there was a threat to like make him even testify. So I'm sure they'll try to cooperate and keep things hushed and squashed as possible and manage Hunter as much as possible. But we'll see how far he's willing to push us to not get any sort of, jail time or anything. Which Joe could always just. I have no expectation that Hunter is going to be in jail. I have no expectation of that. I don't necessarily even have a desire of that, but I people don't live by their own ethics though. You can't expect every law abiding citizen to have their rights restricted over things that they're not responsible for, they didn't do, but you think they should have their liberties restricted, but you won't even punish someone who has clearly broken the law. So that's why I've harped on the gun thing. And they clearly wanted to sweep it under the rug before, and they didn't get away with it because the judge was like, "This plea deal is crazy," and I'm not going along with it. So the DOJ backed up because everything just kind of fell apart. So they've decided to go with his gun charge, but they haven't announced anything else on his taxes. And he did crazy thing with his taxes, like, writing off like, hookers and other things like that. Um, that they could clearly get him on for a lot of things. We don't know if they'll charge him with that. And there's also the Foreign Agents Registration Act that he's probably violated, and that would also tie in Joe Biden, and also tie in Joe Biden with his taxes and stuff too. So they tried to make everything go away as quietly as possible, and it didn't. I guess even with so many things that you see that make you raise your eyebrow, particularly with a lot of Trump stuff, with the justice system, at least there's some buffers in some place, like with the judge that was just like, this is crazy, we're not gonna just like let you get away with all this stuff. And everything just kind of fell apart. But we'll have to see what else they ended up pursuing as far as Hunter, because I'm sure they don't want to have to embarrass Joe and pull him into the other stuff. So a lot of people are saying the gun indictment is really just a distraction. And I don't disagree with that. Not that it's not warranted, because he did break the law very clearly. And you talk these Dems talk a big game. Eventually, it's going to blow back in your face when you break the law, and particularly with the guns. So it's warranted, but there's other things that are a much bigger deal, that need to be addressed. That I don't know if they will or won't get him for. I do want to share like two different tweets that I just think are rich regarding this whole ordeal. um because some Democrats are upset, like, oh, this is gonna be so sad for Joe Biden, his son, and crackhead son, etc. And then they're just like, if this wouldn't have happened to anyone else, it's because he's the president's son. And Keisha Lance Bottoms here, senior advisor to the president of the United States. Okay. Can anyone tell me how many people have been federally indicted for purchasing a gun while dealing with substance abuse issues? I don't know the answer, but in my 29 years as an attorney, I have never heard of it. So those are the kind of commentaries and stuff. But that's not necessarily a good thing. Why is it a law if no one's gonna like do anything about it? Because people have clearly. I don't think many people who lie on their ATF forms though go and write a memoir about their drug escapades. So I don't know. Maybe that's an issue too, proving it. And it's kind of on Hunter. And Ellie Mistal was like, good job, Merrick Garland. Your weakness has orchestrated the indictment of a private citizen trying to overcome drug addiction so Republicans could try to hit a bank shot off of him and his loving father, all because you were afraid of looking political to Fox News viewers. That's such garbage. He clearly Garland clearly tried to, give him an out, and it all exploded. But oh, poor Hunter, poor Joe Biden. He just loves his son. How many parents love their son during the age of the mass incarceration, going after people for doing drugs, selling drugs, and three strikes and all that stuff? How many parents love their sons that got locked away for decades and whatnot? So I'm not saying revenge, but just like this mentality of, oh, this is only happening because it's the president's son. Think about how much stuff that Hunter gets away with because he is the president's son, or how much access he's had because he is the president's son, how much money he's had because he is the president's son. They know he's not really talented in real life. He's just used for access. I want to show you this other thing before I move on. Daniel Goldman, who's been really trying to be the lawyer for Joe Biden. Um, he's a congressman from New York, but he's had some dumb takes and dumb remarks. But he retweeted Ted Cruz and said evidence shows that Biden executed official U.S. policy shared by the EU, the IMF, and GOP senators, and Shokin's removal was bad for Hunter's business. Do you have evidence that Joe was really there and knew about the text? You're quite familiar with periphery, right? And so Ted Cruz referenced the text message of Hunter threatening a businessman. So I, I just posted an article about the different evidence that's available regarding Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's entanglements. Um, there's clearly evidence that they're involved in each other's business dealings, and people can just stop the delusion. Now, maybe you don't think it's enough evidence, but there is evidence. The text is bad enough, right? The text is bad enough. Um, of Hunter threatening a businessman, saying, "My dad's right next to me." But I also wrote about this some time ago on blacktnews.com that there was evidence that there's a picture of Hunter, like in Delaware, the same day. The same day. There's also photo evidence of Biden from 2 days ago, of sending that text, that he was in Delaware close to his home too. So it is very likely that they were next to each other. So you can say, oh, well, this is all circumstantial. So is forensic evidence, fingerprints and blood at a crime scene. So it's so funny. They're like, the media and all these folks are like, we want to see direct evidence. That's circumstantial evidence. Well, you're probably not going to find I don't know, a confession from Joe Biden, or video of him depositing a $5 million check or something, if that's what you want. But there's plenty of circumstantial evidence, and Hunter Biden has implicated his dad a lot. And I think it would be better if Democrats just grew a spine and decided to throw the old man under the bus. He is a huge liability. I know they think it's worth the risk as long as Trump is running. And as long as Trump is the nominee, because he's going to be caught up in so many things regarding the election, and that it's a gamble on both ends. It really is. But to me, it doesn't make sense. You put your best foot forward, and the Democrats, they definitely have better options. I don't think they'll be, their bench is a good bench at all. As far as it being good for the nation, but they definitely have better choices to ensure victory, and people who will still pursue a very progressive agenda. They're a well-oiled machine as far as like the push to keep getting radical and radical and radical. That's clearly the direction they want to go. You know, um, So why they don't just get rid of the old man? I really don't know. I really don't know. I don't understand. but they'll keep covering for him. But it's delusional, sick, and it's dumb. Okay, moving on. Um, let's talk about Donald Trump and his interview with Megyn Kelly. I'm there's a couple different parts. I had clips, part of it was just going to play from the interview. But I think like three different things I want to address are kind of back to back in this interview. So I'm going to go ahead and play this right from the interview. Sorry, play this from the interview itself. So again, you guys can go ahead and watch it yourself. I thought it was pretty good. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are, I guess, maybe in the Ron camp, or they could be in other people's camps too. But let's just say the I'm done with Trump camp, and I won't even, and I don't think they're never Trumpers. They're just I'm done with Trump camp, and who are like, oh, this was such a terrible interview for him, and I I don't. That wasn't my perception watching it. There's definitely things that he wasn't honest about. But if you're someone, people who don't like him don't like him. You need the interview to be bad for people who are on the fence. You need the interview to be bad for people who really like him, and you need to, because you need to flip those votes to other people. So I don't know if anything happened in the interview, with the exception of maybe his um unwillingness to claim any wrongdoing in the pandemic that would really sway those people. And I do think that's, powerful enough to push some people like, it makes me really uncomfortable, bro. Cause watching this, I don't know how much I would assume he would do things differently if he was in this situation, like for a repeat. Um, but people like to see some kind of accountability, and he's just like, "Oh, everything was, I saved hundreds of millions of people," and we'll just watch it. So um, we'll start from. I think they're gonna go here from. I'm not gonna watch. We're not gonna watch the whole segment on Corona, but he was asked about the pandemic and his handling of it, and he talked about like, oh, all these people said, my Democrat friends said I did a great job, I need to take more credit for it, and other kind of stuff. Um and he was asked about Fauci, and the Fauci thing was a really big thing. And then I'm going to play that part, and then I'm going to play like a DeSantis response to it, and then I'm going to go into the rest of the interview.
Fire Anthony Fauci was because he'd been there for a long time, that you would have taken heat, that it would have created a firestorm, quoting your words. Then for the first time in May...
I also said I didn't listen to him too much.
I'm getting there. But then in May, you started saying, well, he's a civil servant, so I couldn't technically. The truth is, though, not only did you not fire Fauci, who is loathed by many, millions of Republicans in particular, but also some Democrats.
By the way,
you made him a star. You made him a star. This is the criticism of you, that you made him the face of the White House coronavirus task
You think
force,
so?
that he was out at every presser, that he was running herd for the administration on COVID, and that you actually gave him a presidential commendation before he left office. Wouldn't you like a do-over on that?
I don't know who gave him the commendation. I really don't know who gave him the commendation.
Presidential commendation. One went out to Mark
Somebody
Miller, too.
probably.
So, who gave him the presidential commendation? Well, there's some reports have come out since after this, like some people within the Trump administration said that no, he would have needed to sign off on it. Now, there's sometimes you get things from the president and it has a signature on it or whatever, like the president is not like. When my grandmother turned 100, we got like a special, paper from the president that was just commemorating, like, oh, you've been alive for 100 years. It's so great, etc. I don't know exactly what it says, but or at least I don't remember. And we didn't directly get talk to Trump and got someone and talk to him on the phone or something like for him to get that. We knew a person who handles that kind of stuff, who gets it done. So he's not like vetting everything that kind of happens. But giving an award to Fauci, that's kind of a big deal. So I would say that he probably knew about that, and maybe I'm not saying that was his initial decision to make that happen, but to be like, I don't know who that happened, how that happened. That's just not believable. But if it is the case that he had nothing to do with his presidential awards and stuff that goes out to people, people are like, does that say that you're not exactly driving the bus there? So it's not a great answer from him, and to kind of pretend um that he's not responsible for Fauci, and which Fauci's been along for a while. If you haven't seen on Daily Wire, I think one of their best like sort of docu things that they did um was Michael Knowles. He did a series on Anthony Fauci, like during COVID stuff, but going back to the AIDS pandemic. And I recommend, if you have Daily Wire Plus, because I think that's the only way you can watch it, to go watch that. It's really fascinating to see um just how he's been involved for this long when he did so many terrible things, made so many bad calls. But he's been around a long time. Trump doesn't have that sort of experience. He's listening to experts. I don't begrudge him listening to experts and not knowing all that's going on at the beginning. According to Dr. Bricks's books, she was the one who wanted to shut down, and she convinced Fauci, and then they convinced Trump. And apparently they didn't even have the data to really justify it, but they just expected the data to come. And I had said that before in a live, and my sister was just like, they spoke it into existence, or was like uses like some faith-based kind of science, like trying to will it to existence or whatever. But he listened to he probably got all this news, like all these millions of people will die, best case scenario, even if we do everything right. So we don't want all these people to die. And that wasn't an easy decision, I would say, because the economy was really good. You had people like Bill Maher. I don't know if you guys remember this, but he said he wanted the economy to crash or fail because he didn't want Donald Trump to be president again. So there was that kind of rhetoric going on, and people were waiting for the economy to fail. And then COVID happened, and the economy was definitely impacted, but we definitely grinded it to a halt due to our lockdown policies and stuff. So that was a huge decision for Trump to make, and he did it in the interest of saving lives. And I was very optimistic at first, even though like we don't know what's going on with all this, because he had a plan. He got Mike Pence to be like over the governors, and they got the ventilators and masks and all that different stuff together, and it felt like everyone was kind of unified at first until the media kind of like was like, we have an election to win, and really started pushing governors to say bad things about Trump and other stuff. And eventually you saw the tide kind of turn, and Democrats said things like, we can still get our agenda done, we can use a pandemic, never waste a good crisis, all kind of stuff. But 15 days of slow the spread was the beginning of the end of his presidency, for sure. And he's annoyed by like Ron DeSantis, and who's just like, oh, we're free in Florida, blah blah blah. And people were free in Florida. I know plenty of people went down to Florida to be free, and people who then moved down to Florida to be free. And they were closed for a little bit, but they did open up. And Trump, he's like, well, it was the governors that got to decide what to do with their states. And that's true. However, at the same time, he was pressuring people like Governor Kemp when he decided to open up Georgia. And he trashed him, on TV, and he would tweet things. And so it's true that it was still Kemp's, and he tried to discourage him from doing it. And Kemp was just like looking at the data, and he's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. And Trump didn't like the sort of pressure that it put on him for that state being opened up, because people be like, look at Georgia, these people are dying. And Trump doesn't want that. So he, he was trashing Kemp, and Kemp was just kind of like, well, I can either back down and look like a punk, or I can do what I think is right. And he decided to continue doing what he thought was right. So Trump can be like, I just left it to the governors, but he did, try to pressure people into not being open, and he would tweet, they're opening too fast. At the same time, if it was like a Democrat state, though, he's like, liberate Michigan. So him trying to memory hole all this pandemic stuff isn't good. Like Megyn Kelly asked him, like, what about Operation Warp Speed that help, people were helped by the jab, but people were also vaccine injured. And he was just like, well, that was their choice. Everybody made a choice. I didn't mandate it, which is true. I appreciate that. But it's usually you show a little empathy in a situation where you're like, people were injured. You're just like, well, that was their so especially when people, trusted in this technology, trusted in the medicine, and trusted in the people who said that you should get it. So if anything, this interview was going to turn some people away from being like diehards, maybe it was that pandemic section of the interview. But I don't really think anything in the rest of it will, if you're Team Trump, they're gonna be like, oh, that he just crashed and burned, I can no longer vote for him. I didn't see that. So the people like ripping on Trump and saying it was such a terrible interview, I didn't see that, in my opinion. But let me show you this DeSantis reply to some of the stuff that he said before I move on, and I'll show you a little bit more of the interview. Particularly, I want to show you the segment on like transgender stuff, and then we're gonna also show a bit about the classified documents.
Former president's interview with Megyn Kelly last night, trying to relitigate a lot of these COVID issues and controversies from the end of his presidency. You were accused of having one of the worst lockdowns in the country, vaccine mandates, praising Fauci for months on end. I want to give you a chance to respond to all of that, because all that stuff was mentioned by the former president in that interview.
Well, first, I think it's important to say that that is different from what Donald Trump used to say. I mean, he used to praise Florida for having been open. He used to say I was one of the country's great governors. He said we handled COVID correctly and brilliantly. So he used to say that. He was on record always saying that. Now, because I'm a threat to him, that's when he's now changing his tune. But some of the things he's saying are just bold-faced lies. We never mandated mRNA COVID shots. In fact, I called a special session of the Florida legislature to prevent any mandates in the state, and not just by the state government or local government. We provided protections for employees at private businesses, which a lot of establishment Republicans basically were saying businesses should be able to do whatever they want.
Kristi Noem said that. Kristi Noem told her own constituents in July of 2021 that if you don't want to work for a company with a vaccine mandate, just go get another job. She said that publicly.
Yeah. So what they said about Kristi Noem is true. There's a tweet of her saying that. So people began to bring that up because Kristi Noem did endorse Donald Trump, and she wouldn't name, I don't think she named any names in her speech, but she talked about how some people, didn't stand up for people during the lockdowns, but Trump did. And so I was triggered by her speech because it was such a revisionist history of events. And again, I appreciate Trump not having like mandates and other stuff like that, which, the vaccine had just kind of started being rolled out at the time when, by the time of the end of his presidency. But but I don't think he would have mandated anything anyway. But he definitely wouldn't have done things like how Biden did things. But there were definitely moments, particularly like with Kemp and other stuff, where Trump wasn't as strong for the opening as he pretends to be now, or like just kind of left it to the governors as much as he kind of claims to now, as if he didn't have his thumb on the trigger. with stuff. So, but they are correct about Christino.
And that's, so you're basically saying, your job or the jab, you have to make a choice in that. So we fought against that. Clearly, Florida led the way in being open, much to the attacks that I used to suffer from. And a lot of the attacks that I suffered from through the balance of 2020 was the media in Florida leveraging the Trump White House against me and saying, oh, the governor isn't following the Trump White House directives. He has restaurants open. He has schools open. He has all that stuff. So they really used that White House task force as a cudgel to try to beat me over the head, to try to portray me as being reckless because, we had opened the state and we were doing all that. So that's just the reality. And then on Fauci, Steve, I'm the one that sold Don't Fauci my Florida shirts like 2 years ago. Don't Fauci my Florida flip-flops. I mean, this has been a rallying cry that we stood up to Fauci in Florida. The free state of Florida would not have been what we are were it not for, were it not for us standing up to Fauci. That's the bread and butter of what we've done to fight against Fauci. And here's the thing. I fought against Fauci when he was popular. It's easy for Republicans to ding him now because he's unpopular with the broader electorate. Back then, Donald Trump used to cite Fauci's poll numbers as a reason why Fauci was somebody that should be listened to. He said, Fauci's got these great poll numbers, but we're listening to Fauci. Why don't we have the same poll numbers? And his campaign for re-election in October of 2020, they were running videos where Fauci is bragging that Donald Trump did everything I told him to do. They were putting that out as a positive message for their candidate. And then, of course, he did give Fauci a presidential commendation his last day in office. Megyn asked him about it, and he said, like, what was that? Was that the immaculate commendation that just happened to happen? It said Donald Trump awards Fauci this commendation. So I thought it was really pathetic to sit there and listen to that drivel. It is totally false. And you know what? People in your business, and I know you've spoken out, there's people in your business who have their own shows. They know all that's false, too. We'll see how many of them are willing to step up to the plate and call a spade a spade.
So, I mean, what he said about the Fauci stuff and Trump and all that stuff is it's true. I don't know. Some of his outrage at the end, I don't know, sounds a little inorganic. Though he probably does find it annoying. I'm not saying he's not mad. He's just doesn't quite have that natural charisma. And this is an ad from the Trump campaign in 2020. So they were using Fauci for sure. Oh, uploaded in the wrong spot. Give me 1 second. But I think Republicans largely disliked Fauci for a while, but there was a lot of people, independents and Democrats and people who were really depending on Fauci, and they saw him as a face. And then the media, of course, was deferring to him. So Trump, they're saying that he's not listening to experts. He's not listening to Fauci. So Trump was just like, no, we're listening to Fauci. Fauci says we're listening to Fauci. We're listening to Fauci. And, they made ads on it. You can't just like renege like those things didn't happen.
To what I have said and what the other people on the task force have said.
The first and only time that I went in and said we should do mitigation strongly, the response was, yes, we'll do it. When he suggests, why don't we do this? And I say, no, that's really not a good idea from a scientific standpoint. He has never overruled me. The travel was another recommendation. When we went in and said, we probably should be doing that, and the answer was yes.
When I've made recommendations, he's taken them.
And then another time was we should do it with Europe, and the answer was yes.
He's never countered or overridden me.
And the next time we should do it with the UK, and the answer was yes. I never, in the multiple times that I've done that, where I said, for scientific reasons, we really should do this, that he hasn't said, let's do it. The first and only time that Dr. Birx and I went in and formally made a recommendation to the president to actually have a, quote, shutdown. The president listened to the recommendation and went to the mitigation.
So I mean, it happened. We all understand why it happened. I mean, it was politics. Now, as soon as Biden was like announced to be the person, had won and whatnot, not like immediately like election night, but sometime after like some of the court stuff fell through, Fauci started changing his tune real quick. He's like, "Oh, it's nice to have someone who will listen." So he just, all the stuff he's on TV claiming that Trump listened to him, etc., that changed all of a sudden. And he was just kind of, I don't know if he ever like really harsh, but it was obvious digs at Trump for not being pro science or really listening enough, like he was a difficult person. So I think the truth might be between Fauci and Trump, and how much they coordinate, and how much he relented. I mean, on the outside he obviously relented to a lot of things, but I'm sure they bumped heads more than we're probably aware of. The truth is somewhere probably in the middle. But as far as what he said publicly, what ads that they cut and put out for campaigns and stuff, it is what it is. So he would look up more credible on the situation if you just kind of own up to it. I mean, I think it was a time unlike any other, and most people get that. But the thing that concerns and has turned people off from Trump is that if he does something, he seems uncorrectable. And him doubling down again, like, oh, people are vaccine injured. It's just like, oh, those are, it was their choice. Or there was another interview he had some time ago when he just kind of, I think maybe it was with Candace, and he just pretended like, there was no kind of bad altercations or whatever with the jab. So it's just like, he did a great thing. He led this. This was this, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't want to own up to quite everything that he did. And he won't say if he really made some mistakes, though it's obvious, because you don't want to own up to everything that you did. So anyway, let's look at some other parts of the interview. Again, I think that's the only thing that would make people angry enough to be like, you know what, I'm over this guy. But I think there's some other things that I didn't really like this segment with him with Caitlyn Jenner and trans stuff, though some of Trump's critics are exaggerating. I think people are playing politics, I think, with this clip a lot. But let's watch it.
Let's shift gears and talk about trans and women's rights. In 2016, you said that Caitlyn Jenner, who is trans, could use the women's restroom at Trump Tower. You allowed biological men to compete in the Miss Universe pageant at the time, which you owned. A lot has changed since 2016. Have you?
Yeah, well, I have, but look, I knew Caitlyn Jenner. This is very much like the same subject we just talked about. This was brand new.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a brand new subject. Also, there's a lot
it hadn't exploded.
A lot of it hadn't exploded. I mean, nobody talked about it really, and so they're saying, "What do you think?" And people say, "Yes, use, no use." But I'm the one that wouldn't allow it in the military. That was a big move. I wouldn't allow it in the military. And I went to generals. I say, "General, let me ask you, do you like it?" The real generals, not the ones you see on television, not the Millies of the world. I went to the real generals. I said, "What do you think?" And they did not like it. They did not like it. Nobody wanted to go public with it. It's a very hard subject. I ended it in the military. Now, since this character got in, he's allowed it in the military. Part of the problem is you'd have to take massive amounts of drugs. In the military, you're not allowed to take drugs. And you have to take massive amounts of drugs. So right there, it should not be allowed. But I took a lot of heat. No matter what you do there, you're going to take heat. You understand?
Yeah.
But
how do you
Caitlyn Jenner, was she allowed?
Should biological men who say that they're trans be allowed in women's restrooms and women's locker rooms, women's prisons, women's spaces?
Yeah, my stance on that is really pretty much what I had in the military. I think it has to be, huh?
No, they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's my stance. I mean, that's been my stance. I may have allowed Caitlyn, and Caitlyn's Caitlyn, right? I knew Caitlyn as Bruce. I knew Bruce, and Bruce was a great athlete. and a very handsome person, very handsome guy. And all of a sudden, Bruce is Caitlin. I said, "What's this all about?" This was a brand new subject too, just like we talk about. The pandemic was a subject that nobody knew anything about.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew anything about it. It was all early. You make a decision, and you make the decision very strongly.
No, I get it. Look, I myself have changed a lot on this
Yeah, I
issue
have.
since 2016. I'm just trying to figure out whether you have in fact reversed on it.
I don't think I've changed. I think I've just, at the beginning, it was such a small subject. Nobody really thought about it. But then with time, you change. Where I probably took the hardest line was on the military.
Yeah, that's true. What about the children? That's become an issue now. Should children be provided with access to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones when they're minors?
Yeah.
So we'll get to that in a second, but as far as when I was listening to this, he's like, well, Caitlyn is Caitlyn, and I'm just like, nope. There's no. But I remember back in 2016 when this was a question, when this was a thing, and I was pretty. He was kind of fumbling through it. He didn't know. It seemed like he didn't know exactly how he felt about it, and he was trying to fill out the base on how they felt about it. Because there was politically, there was a ordinance in Charlotte, and there was protesting of the state when they set an order of like you can't like people have to go in their own bathrooms and whatever and stuff. So it ended up becoming like a big national thing and conversation. And I'm sure that's why it elevated. And then, had Bruce Jenner transitioned to Caitlyn and got the Woman of the Year award. And, Ben Shapiro's Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings Things was born, and he got assaulted or threatened by, Zoe Tur on Dr. Drew. And it was just kind of a wild time as all this was kind of emerging. And Jenner was one of the people who kind of helped to launch this into the stratosphere, certainly. So Trump did say that Caitlyn was allowed in to go use the bathroom at Trump Tower. And I think that was kind of his compromise for it. And there was even a video of Jenner going to use the bathroom at the tower. And but I remember not liking his stance on it. So I know a lot of people have moved and maybe as it has exploded, they're less tolerant on this issue than maybe they were in the past. I was always like, I don't like that. And I remember he was on Hannity a lot, and they were interviewing about it, and it seemed like Hannity was kind of trying to feed him answers as he was asking questions. And I didn't like it. I didn't like his kind of handling of it. And I didn't really like his handling of the question kind of there. Like, well, Caitlyn, what does that mean? Does it mean that you still think that if I'm in the bathroom, that if Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn wants to come in the bathroom with me, then that's fine because Bruce and you've known him all that time. That doesn't matter. That he's still a dude. He could go elsewhere. So, and I know not everybody has the same opinion about it as I do. I did write an article about it on blacktnews.com, kind of fleshing out my thoughts more intently, but you guys can go check that out. But yeah, he is correct that the military stance he got a lot of heat on and people really pushed back on, which that should have been like way less controversial, I think, because there's a lot of things you can't there's different physical assessments that you have to meet within the military. But now there's people, I've seen TikToks of people going into the military, being in the military, and talking about how they're paying for our taxpayer dollars are paying for their transition. So things have definitely changed. And military should be about, blowing stuff up and, taking out bad guys and all kinds of different things. And acting as a unit, and you're you taking time out to get on these different hormones and stuff, and surgery for to either get breast or chop off your breasts. I don't really think that's the purview of the military. But um, so while he says that's the hard stance that he had, it's he said he talked to generals and other people like, no, we shouldn't have this stuff. That's still kind of more in a world of common sense. It's the no brainer, and I think the question of can Caitlyn use the bathrooms is more complicated. So I think that's kind of why he muddled around with it and didn't give like kind of a stern kind of like no. But him and Caitlyn have been at odds on this subject. You know, sometimes like Caitlyn's come out against him, Bruce come out against him, and they've made up and whatnot. I think Jenner's team Trump right now, but anyway, let's keep watching.
I'm so against it. First of all, many of them, I heard like 62%, when they grow up, when they're older, they're saying, who did this to me? Why did you do this to me? Second of all, the parents have to make the decision. You know, they're trying to give it to school boards and schools and things to make a decision. It's unbelievable to think, I talk about mutilation sometimes in my speeches. We will stop the mutilation of children. And then I'll stop and I'll say to the people in the audience, I'll say, can you imagine that I'm talking about we're going to stop mutilation of children? But that's what it is. It's the mutilation of children. And we will stop the mutilation of children. 10 years ago, you wouldn't even, nobody would ever think of it. I am telling people, because I guess I'm a politician, whether I like it or not, as a politician, as somebody that represents a lot of people, I'm telling people that we're going to stop the mutilation of children. Who would have to say a thing like that? You'd think it would be automatic.
Would you be in favor of a ban then on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors?
I think yes. Yep. I would.
Can a man become a woman?
In my opinion, you have a man, you have a woman. I think part of it is birth. Can the man give birth? No, although they'll come up with some answer to that also someday. I heard just the other day, they have a way that now the man can give birth. No, I would say I'll continue my stance on that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the criminal cases.
Okay, so I do want to go into the criminal case thing, but he's getting dunked on for sure by people who dislike him. They're like, oh, he didn't answer, he refused to. No, he answered. He said no. He didn't think so. He didn't have the most eloquent sort of answer. I think like Ron DeSantis and certainly Vivek, though I still don't like him. They have can talk about these issues in a far more eloquent way than Trump obviously just did. And he's talking to a tough, fair journalist, but she's a friendly, so hopefully when he's talking to someone else, he'll be able to have a better sort of answer than because and then people go into like, well, not all women can give birth and then and then you made a bit of a joke like with technology and other stuff, but and also with the puberty blocker situation, he said that it should be the parents' rights. It should be up to the parents, and these school boards and other people are trying to. I think he's trying to talk about how different. They are pushing in schools, but there are parents in danger, and there are parents who have lost custody of their children for not affirming their identities and other stuff like that. So, and people having secret gender plans, all that stuff. In those cases, like he's like the parents have to be, involved. You can't X them out and other stuff like that. But you don't want to just say the parent has full control, and because there are parents who are like they're the ones who are saying yes, they can get the puberty blockers and all the other stuff. So the thing should be about children don't know all the effects that are going to happen to them, and we need to protect the kids. And a lot of these parents are being emotionally manipulated and lied to. They do tell parents, like, would you rather have a dead son or an alive daughter? That's what they tell them. Their kid will hurt themselves if they don't go along with this. And it's funny, I saw this really good TikTok the other day. Someone mentioned that the ACLU was against Lupron and stuff for chemically castrating criminals, but they're for like these puberty blockers and Lupron and stuff for these kids who want to affirm their identity. So pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Chemical castration is good for the children, just not for the child sexual assaulters. So that's where the ACLU is. But I think was it last week we covered a story in the ACLU how they were so sad, I guess, that they executed a assaulter in a sexual assaulter in Florida because they also believed that they were a woman and didn't get to transition before they were executed, and just kind of all kinds of crazy stuff. But the case file stuff is interesting though, and if you've been following me for a while, I keep saying repeatedly that I think this is the thing that is going to give Trump the most trouble legally. Now he's going to be in trouble because he's going to be judged in DC. He's going to be judged in liberal parts of different states and stuff. And even though the most favorable jury might be in Florida for him, he's got some issue with these documents. But I think I don't agree with all of his legal kind of conclusions, but I think he said something that was kind of compelling that'll get people sympathetic to him.
Okay.
In particular, I'm interested in the obstruction case. Some argue that, criminal or not, you behaved irresponsibly with our national security documents. For example, we've all now heard the audio tape of you, post-presidency, showing third parties some sort of document that you're describing as secret. Allegedly, it was a Department of Defense Mark Milley plan to attack Iran. Now, this was at a meeting right here at Bedminster, where we are now. You later told Bret Baier in an interview that you had no document that day, only newspapers and magazines. But we hear you on the tape. We hear you saying, quote, "Look, this was him. This was the Defense Department and him. It's highly confidential. This is secret. This was done by the military and given to me. As president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't. This is still a secret." Now, why would you describe a newspaper article as highly confidential and still a secret, saying as president you could have declassified it, but now you can't?
Let me just tell you something. Number one, I did nothing wrong because I come under the Presidential Records Act. The fascists who are going after me, and they're not going after Biden, even though he has about 10 times more documents, maybe more than that. He has documents going back 40 years or 50 years. We did nothing wrong. I come under the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to have these documents. This was done in 1978, and this was done for exactly this reason. I'm allowed to have these documents. The other side didn't even mention that. They don't even mention the words Presidential Records Act. The Presidential Records Act is very important. Bill Clinton took out in his Sox, it's called the Sox case,
I'm familiar.
where a very respected judge, very liberal judge, but a very respected judge, ruled in favor of Bill Clinton that he was allowed to take these very important documents, conversations with world leaders, took it out in his socks, and they found them in his sock drawer, and they call it the Sox case. Other people too. We come under the Presidential Records Act. Now, who doesn't is Mike Pence doesn't, because he was a vice president, and he has a much higher standard. Joe Biden doesn't, because he was a vice president at the time and he was a senator. He's got thousands of documents as a senator. And even I watched a couple of Democrat senators say very strongly, there's no way he took that out from the SCIF. He's got documents and he's fighting them like crazy. I come under the Presidential Records Act. It's a very simple thing. Number one, it's civil. It's not criminal at all. True. These fascists and these Marxists and these people that are dealing, and they leak, and they're disgusting people. They're horrible for the country. We have a deranged guy named Jack Smith who's been overturned at the Supreme Court a number of times, and he gets overturned. You know why he gets overturned? Because he goes too far. They don't even mention the Presidential Records Act. This is all about the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to have these documents. I'm allowed to take these documents, classified or not classified. And frankly, when I have them, they become unclassified. People think you have to go through a ritual. You don't. At least in my opinion, you don't. But it's even beyond that.
So he said a lot there. So he she asked a particular question, and he went into a lot of whataboutism with Biden and other things. And um if you're first of all, I she said we're all aware of the recording. Now, I have played the recording. I talked about it when it was just like a manuscript, I think, and then I played the recording. I've played Brett Baer's interview. I talked about different interviews that he had, and I talked about like, oh well, I guess it's possible he could be talking about newspapers here, etc. Blah blah blah. Um, but then and I'm like, well, they said they didn't have the document. They couldn't find the document that he's even talking about. And then their superseded indictment came out, and yeah, they had the document that was classified. As they're not mentioning the Presidential Records Act because they're not coming at him because they think that he violated the Presidential Records Act. They're saying it's obstruction, which he has, I think, a compelling sort of rebuttal to that as well that we'll get to. But as far as Mike Pence and Joe Biden and other people shouldn't have those documents. No, they shouldn't have had those documents. And you could argue maybe someone should have gone after them um, for just simply possessing them or whatever. But Trump's they didn't react to they definitely after this stuff came out about Trump, they're like, oh, we have these documents, let's turn them in. So that's questionable, sure, but Trump did get a subpoena, and he did not react well to the subpoena. So that's why he's in a lot of trouble for stuff. So it's not exactly the same situation going on, but he didn't really respond to the whole document thing. And he's saying that they're all, they're his documents. He has that power, which is questionable, but he very clearly on the tape thought that they were classified. So in his mind, he didn't classify them. So to just say that because they're in his possession, they're inherently declassified. Therefore, if he showed them to everyone in the room, that doesn't appear to be at all what he believed, because he said that they were classified, they were still secret. So that's not gonna, maybe people who are like over Trump and interested in watching the interview are gonna be like, oh, that sounds good to me. But when they tear that apart in court, I don't know how the jury's gonna respond, because that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But let's keep watching.
Because the Presidential Records Act allows you to do as president, only as president. Now, the other people that we talk about, including Biden, he wasn't president. So what he did is a different standard, and he should have real problems. They really should be talking about that, not about me. I did absolutely nothing wrong.
Okay, but let's get to my question. Why would you be holding?
I also take issue with him saying he did nothing wrong. I think he should really say I did nothing criminal, but that's not his thing. He's just gonna say he did nothing wrong. The reason why they have so much information is because he was doing things that weren't legal, or things that his lawyers felt weren't legal, or asking his lawyers to do things that weren't legal, to the point where that attorney-client privilege broke. And now I think if they could find a way to make information inadmissible in court, because they're like, well, a lot of this information you got from my lawyers, I think he'll have a much better shot with his case. But they were moving documents. He was lying to his lawyers, like, oh, we turned it all in, but they moved it there. He's hiding it at different places, hiding in the bathroom and other stuff. And he had someone fly documents from Mar-a-Lago to Bedminster, where they are right now, and that individual is also in trouble, being prosecuted as well, indicted as well. So to say he asked at one point his lawyers, like, can we do what Hillary Clinton did? So because I guess she got away with hiding information or whatever. So I don't care how much you like him, but he didn't act appropriately at all times with this stuff, especially since that people hate his guts, and everything he does is under a microscope anyway. And we can say, did he do things that were criminal? Did he do where was not criminal? Whatever. But it's like, I did nothing wrong. I know that's just how he is, but he absolutely did some things that were not up to snuff, and that weren't a good look, and are very questionable as far as like his judgment on how he handled the entire situation. He really could have just given the documents back. He really could have just done that. And you can't say, well, he was cooperating them. He was hiding documents from his lawyers, and so they would think that they turned everything over, and again, they were hiding stuff all over the place. If the stuff in the indictment is true, they have to prove those things, right? They're listed, but they still have to prove those things in the court of law. So if the things that are alleged in the indictment are true, and even the document thing where he's like, see here, document, oh, it's still secret. He knew he was being recorded. Like, I don't understand. I just don't understand. It's like Trump dislikes media, but he likes the media and he likes the attention. So sometimes he lets his guard down, like that guy who was doing a big interview about him and post in gosh, I can't remember the name of the journalist, but he talked about a bunch of COVID stuff that made it, and the book came out right before the election, and it made Trump look bad. I'm just like, why? He has this cozy relationship with Maggie Hagerman, who like writes crap all the time. I don't get it. Like, Trump's like, these disgusting people, there's all these leaks. He leaks stuff himself, him and his people. Yes, the FBI and DOJ, they're leaking stuff to the press too, but the Trump team, they leak stuff. They just have such a weird hate-love relationship. It's really weird, but let's keep listening.
Up a newspaper saying this is still secret.
I'd have to look at it.
I could declassify it if I were president.
I would have to look at it.
But that's what you told Bret Baier. You told Bret Baier that was a newspaper.
I could have declassified. No, I also told Bret Baier, as I remember, I don't know, it was a long time interview.
Well, you tell me, what were you waving around?
I also told Bret Baier that it wasn't a classified document.
What were you waving around in that meeting? Because it certainly sounds
I'm not
like
going to talk to you about that, because that's already been, I think, very substantiated, and there's no problem with it.
It hasn't been substantiated. Jack Smith says
Megyn,
it was
let me just tell you.
And you told Bret Baier.
Let me tell you. Here we go again. I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. I'm allowed to do what I want to do. I'm allowed to have documents. The Presidential Records Act is civil, not criminal.
That's true.
In any way. It's
That's
civil.
True.
And I'm covered by it 100%.
Can I ask you what you
and
mean
this
by
shouldn't
that?
even be a case. Now,
no, and I'm not trying to come at you criminally.
Of course,
I'm trying to say.
Of course you are. But listen,
no, I started off by saying,
Megyn, let me just
it's not about the criminal.
This should be a case for Biden, because he is not covered by the Presidential Records Act. This was, I guess, started because Richard Nixon kept documents. So did many other presidents. And so did presidents after. Bush kept documents. Obama kept documents. They all had, in fact, of all people, of all groups, the New York Times wrote a story. The only power that NARA has is to say, please, 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 Mr. President, can we have these documents?
The National Archives.
Okay. Now, they may be able to sue you civilly, not criminally. They may be. They don't even have that power, probably, but they may be able. But
so
listen,
I get all that.
The New York Times.
I get all that. But the obstruction case isn't about that. The obstruction case says, so even if you had the right to the documents, once you get the subpoena, you got to fork them over. The subpoena said, give us anything with a classified marking. Go ahead.
This is just like the Mueller stuff. They create a fake crime, and then they say you obstructed. This is a fake thing that they've done. And then they say it's always obstruction. They say, oh, he obstructed, he this, he that. And you know what they call obstruction? When you fight them. When you fight them, they call it obstruction. So they create a fake crime because there was no crime, because I come under it. I don't want to sound boring to all of your many people. I hope you have a lot of people. You will. But you know what? They create a fake crime. And they did that with Mueller. They created a fake crime, a terrible fake thing that took 2 years. And then they said, all right, that's fake, but he obstructed. That's what they do here. They have a fake crime, and I didn't obstruct anything. Okay, next.
Well, that was my question.
So I thought that particular answer from Trump, was really good, because Again, I just told you I would not say that he did do anything wrong. He's definitely did some questionable things. Someone in the comments asked, does a recording speak to the contents of what the document was? It's assumed from the conversation that is a classified document. He's like showing, because Milley had there was some kind of plan that Milley was saying that Trump had to attack Iran or something like that, and Trump was like, he got sent something from the military. He didn't put it out. They sent it to him or something. And so it's assumed that that's the document he's showing them. That's the evidence. Like, look, this is what they sent. You're like, this proves, that I'm right, that he's wrong or whatever. So I'm paraphrasing the conversation. I don't remember exactly. And so Trump, his explanation was that he's like, he prints up a lot of stuff, he reads a lot of stuff, he has a lot of papers on his desk or whatever, and so he's holding up newspapers or whatever. So you could definitely hear he has papers or something in his hand that he's showing around. So his explanation kind of makes sense. And so, as the story was coming out, again, we covered it, and we were going through the evolution of, okay, this looks bad. Okay, that kind of makes sense, and it could be this or whatever. So, what he was saying, what was most compelling about what he was saying is that at the time, at first, it didn't seem like they had the document that was allegedly classified that he allegedly showed everybody. But in the superseded indictment, Florida indictment, that had a bunch of other allegations of stuff that he did and bad behavior, they said that they had the document. So then I was like, oh, so he's not being kind of upfront about all this stuff too. So that kind of, we don't know, I guess. He says one thing, and I thought when he's like, I'm not going to tell you because it's whatever. I thought this was going to be like, because this is a criminal case or whatever, and so I can't go into everything, Megyn. But then he just kind of deflected. But I don't know. We don't know for sure. Again, they'll have to prove those things in court. They'll have to nail him in court on these things that are alleged that he did. If he did the things that are alleged, I think there's some pretty bad behavior in the indictment. However, what I found compelling is that he said, this is like Mueller. They find some kind of fake crime, and then when you fight back, then they say you obstructed, and that's when they get you. And so you instantly have all these emotions and feelings back to that time. And Trump, if I remember correctly, it seemed like he fired Mueller because Mueller just wouldn't come out and say things like publicly about like Trump, having no connection to the dossier and other kinds of things that people were alleging, and the collusion and whatnot. And he and when he fired Comey, it triggered all this stuff. And they're like, oh, he's trying to obstruct and stuff. And it became a big, investigation. And he was, would talk about it, was very frustrated, and it was all this taxpayer dollar money, and it was on the news all the time. It really weighed down on his presidency. And then they found like, oh, well, he's, vindicated, I suppose. There wasn't any collusion, but he had such bad behavior through this whole thing, and people are saying, just trust the process. It's hard to trust the process when you know that they are doing a witch hunt. So regardless of whether or not this is the same thing, you feel like instantly connected to that, where you sympathize with him because he's been treated so badly and so poorly. So people saying that this wasn't a good interview for Trump, to me that was like the most kind of powerful piece, because again, I don't the stuff of the indictment, you got to read through it. I think a lot of people defending him haven't read through it, and they still have to prove it. But connecting that back to Mueller, like this is just their tactic. They get you on something fake, and then when you fight back, then they come at you. Now, I don't think a lot of his different conclusions are correct, but I think that's a compelling narrative for sure. And so anyone who's saying, oh, this is a bad interview for Trump, For what? Like maybe his lawyers are like, oh gosh, like maybe some things and then the prosecutors are like, we're going to use this clip, we're going to do this, we're going to use that on the stand. Like maybe it's ultimately maybe bad for him for some reasons, but if you're watching and you like Trump and you hear that, you're like, that's right, that's just like the Mueller thing. That makes sense to me. So if you're a DeSantis person going, oh, that was bad anything for Trump, what persuasive thing happened to make someone else not vote for Trump watching that interview? You know? So you could disagree with me or I don't know. And I've had a lot of criticisms of late, but I don't these people dunking on him like this was such a terrible like Dave Rubin and other people, Steve Deese and other folks were like, oh, such a terrible interview. I disagree.
Even if I think they're accusing me of a fake crime, if I get a subpoena, I have to comply. I used to practice law for 10 years. You got to comply. You got to fork over the documents and then fight.
I have been complied with everything. I have given more documents, and they came in. They raided Mar-a-Lago, probably illegally. Okay, and we'll find that out. They took documents that they weren't even allowed to do. But they took documents. They took everything.
I
have, and I would have given it to them. You know what? We had a meeting. I said, what do you want? And instead of doing that, because they're doing this for political reasons, the reason they're doing this is for election interference.
So let me just say, I don't dispute that, frankly. But the question is simply, your lawyers signed a certification saying they had turned over everything that was responsive. Then when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, they found documents that were responsive that had not been produced. Mark Class.
I don't know what the timing is. Again, I'd have to check the time. I don't know. I just don't know the timing. All I know is I'm allowed to have those documents.
But once you get a subpoena, you have to turn them over.
I know this. I don't even know that because I have the right to have those documents. So I don't really know that. These are Democrat fascists that are there to interfere with an election. And frankly, you can't say that they obstructed when they create a fake crime. So ready? In Russia, it was a fake crime. At the end, they said, oh, well, that's not working. But he obstructed because he fought us. So they create a fake crime illegally. By the way, illegally. The dossier was fake. Everything was fake. Yeah. And then they say, I fought them and I obstructed. This is the same thing. They have a fake crime. There is no crime. In fact, it's civil. It's not criminal.
That's true.
And
I also want to point out when he got impeached the first time, one of the things that they charged him with was obstruction of Congress, which I still think both of them were dumb, but the obstruction of Congress was just so dumb to me. But like they're co-equal branches, bro. Like he's the president, executive branch. Like you just have to do everything at your beck and call. But the audacity to include that in the impeachment was just so petty to me. And the other charge wasn't great either, but the need for Nancy Pelosi to be like obstruction of Congress. So yeah, you fight him. I think that's a compelling point. She's correct, like on the facts, like you subpoena, you're supposed to turn stuff over. There was things that they found, and he didn't. His compliance that he's acting like he complied with them, that's not really accurate. You know, he did some questionable things along the way, but again, that narrative that he's pushing, I think, is compelling and powerful to a lot of people because of the relationship that that the Democrats and the, if you want to say the deep state or whoever, has with him. And so when Trump was first like president stuff, you'd hear like a news, or when he was running, there'd be different news stories that would come out and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds pretty bad. And then like a day or two passed and you found out the truth and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally lied about that. So to me, I built this like expectation, well, not expectation, but just kind of a rule within myself. If something crazy about Trump happened, you heard something in the news, they claim he did something or whatever, I'd be like, let me give it like a couple days before I react to this, because I'm going to assume they're lying or I'm going to assume there's more to the story. And not because Trump was so trustworthy of a person that he deserved the benefit of the doubt. It's just that his enemies didn't deserve our trust. And so and a lot of times it's, I found that to be the correct stance. So I think if that's a feeling that I had back then, that's a strong feeling that people continue to have, um, regardless of whether he has done something wrong here or not. People have that. I'm going to assume that Trump is right and his enemies are malicious because that's how it's continuously been. So Megan's, asking some things. She's pushing back. She's making a lot of sense. And when she's pushing back like this, well, this is what happens. Like, well, I have to look at it. I have to look at the timing. Want to, just trying to brush it off. And like, these are my records. He keeps going to that. And a lot of people keep defending that. Like, well, those were his records. It doesn't matter. It's his records. It's his records. It's matter act. It's his records. So again, when you have an interview, it's about what you're trying to get out of it. And the people who think this was a bad interview, I just don't, whatever they think they got out of it, I don't think they got, in my opinion.
So they're saying that's why they say Espionage Act to make it criminal.
Oh, they make it Espionage Act like it's something
we'll be here all day
like
if we get
the
into
Spanish Armada is going to raid us. And look, the Espionage Act of 1917 has no impact on this. I am covered 100%.
I got it. There's a dispute about that, about whether presidential. Just so my audience knows.
I don't think there's any dispute that I'm covered under the Presidential Records Act.
Well, you're covered, but it's not clear that it allowed you to take all those documents. You can't say
it says what it says. You're allowed. And
do you believe that every CIA document that came to you as president was automatically yours to keep, no matter what?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Well, so that's the dispute.
No, because I think it's clear in the document. The Presidential Records Act was a very complex thing that took a long time to do, having to do more with Richard Nixon because he kept everything. You know that, right?
Yeah, yep.
And they said, we don't want to have this anymore. So they did this. And these thugs and deranged people, they didn't even mention that. They never mentioned that. They never talked about that. They never said, gee, the Presidential Records Act. Do you know they don't even mention it? And everybody knows that I'm covered by that. So you can't have obstruction when they create. And we had that in Mueller. They created all of these phony deals and phony documents and the dossier, the fake dossier. And after it was created, it was all created. Then it was shown to be phony and I won. But then they say, oh, it was phony. We did things illegally, but he obstructed. He obstructed because he hid this, or he said something, or he fought us. He fought us. No, I did, Megyn, I did absolutely nothing wrong. And I wouldn't even be talking to you if I thought I did.
What's crazy is you're really accused of keeping documents and not turning them over when you were allegedly required to. But you're not accused of destroying any documents.
No, I didn't do that.
Hillary Clinton destroyed documents while under subpoena, and wasn't even charged. Never mind, didn't face 4 criminal trials.
That's right.
So yeah, they're gonna go into Hillary Clinton and other stuff as well. So you guys could go watch that on your own time. I hope Cerise doesn't dig that, but But sometimes when they do bring up Hillary Clinton, it's true that, they gave her a pass, but it's also true that Trump gave her a pass immediately, before he was even in the office. Like I was at the rally in Michigan when people started chanting, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. And he was like, that was fine, during the election, but it's over now. So, and I think in this interview and stuff, he talks about how bad it looks to go after your political opponents, and how how it looks bad and other countries are talking about us, and how he thought it was for the best for the country to not charge or whatever. So it kind of sounds like, he kind of was thinks a little bit about going after folks, but mostly still I think affirms that it's not a good idea. So at the end of the day, I think he still thinks that Hillary shouldn't be charged. So it's kind of a moot point complaining about how she didn't get charged if you didn't think that she should have got charged, and you wouldn't charge her yourself, though that you would be in jail moment was a boss line at the debate. It's, it's not something that that he would follow through on at all. So anyway, very interesting interview. I hope you guys enjoyed those snippets. Megyn Kelly is a very good interviewer. And I'm glad she asked some questions. She pushed back on some. She I watched she did some behind the scenes after the end of the interview, and she said her team fact checked a lot of different things, and so she had there's things that she could have like pushed back more on and fact check with, but she says like during a conversation you have to make a kind of an editorial decision within your head like during the conversation of how much you want to push back on certain facts and stuff, because it's going to ruin the flow of the conversation. You could turn a 45-minute hour interview or whatever into a 5-hour interview if you're going to argue about every little detail. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. So there's definitely other times that she could have like pushed back on it, but she did push back on him on some stuff. But ultimately, I think the emotional impact that he's, still making with his, voters is still pretty monumental. Now, I don't believe all the polls and stuff that are out, especially like the general stuff. And there's polls with him like winning Gen Z and suburban women and not winning the black vote, but having a significantly higher number than what he had before. And I don't think that stuff is accurate. But so just be leery of a lot of polls and stuff that are coming out. But I watching this interview, I'm like, man, his charisma is still, likability and all that stuff. I mean, there's people who despise him or whatever, but he just has natural charisma that other candidates don't particularly have. And even if he's not as well spoken as other candidates are, it's pretty incredible still. So anyway, before I let you guys go, well, maybe I'll table this to Monday. There's a well, I guess I don't want to talk about this too long, so I'll go through it. So the writer from The Watchmen and other works, he apparently wants DC Comics stuff to send royalties from his work to BLM. And that is so bizarre to me. So let me share this article really quick. This is from CNN reported on it. Some other people reported on it. I didn't see Eric July's video on it. I saw that he had a video of it. That's how I became aware of this. But man, I do not like BLM in the slightest. Watchmen's Alan Moore wants future royalties donated to Black Lives Matter. Alan Moore is not happy with how Hollywood has adapted his work. Comic book writer behind the classics, including Watchmen, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and V for Vendetta, talked to The Telegraph about his current dissatisfaction with his industry. Now they're called graphic novels, which sound sophisticated, and you can charge a lot more for them, Moore said. What appealed to me most about comics is no more, and these innocent and inventive and imaginative superhero characters from the 40s, 50s, 60s are being recycled to modern audience as if they were adult fare. Moore acknowledged his own efforts in his comic work may be partly to blame. I didn't mean my experiments with comics to be immediately taken up as something that the whole industry should do, he said. When I was doing things like The Watchmen, I was not saying that dark psychopathic characters are really cool, but that does seem to be the message that the industry took for the next 20 years. Yeah, I would say he definitely influenced a lot. Moore said he made a unique request when it comes to revenue from his projects. I don't really feel with the recent films that they have stood by what I assumed were their original principles, he said. So I asked for DC Comics to send all of the money from any future TV series or films to Black Lives Matter. So, I haven't I mean, I have thousands of comics at my house and stuff, but we grew up on like a lot of like Marvel DC stuff. I guess, this is still under DC's umbrella. I've never read The Watchmen. Um I did go see The Watchmen. I didn't like it. uh, and I definitely didn't know it was going to be as graphic as it was, and how many, sex scenes and stuff are going to be in it. And, we, we actually, with me and my sister, I know my older sister Katrina was with me. I don't remember who else was with me. We went, but my parents were, they were mortified, especially when, they were singing Hallelujah was like the soundtrack to when the owl dude and the girl was banging there. He's just like, are they singing Hallelujah? So it was an experience. But I wasn't really a fan of The Watchmen, the film, and I League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was okay. It wasn't, top tier superhero film. I A lot of people like V for Vendetta. I didn't like V for Vendetta. I didn't like the story so much. And I saw that with a friend when I was in high school. So he's not my favorite, I guess, but I can't stand BLM, and I can't believe there's any people with critical thinking skills that still support that organization. I don't get it. There's so many stories that have been out about people mismanaging the funds, going to pay for um mansions and other things like that. There have been people who have spoken out whose children have been killed in by police and in other instances, and where they've criticized BLM for not spending funds appropriately into different um you know justice causes they think it should go into. A lot of the money has been spent on um, LGBT stuff, drag queens, and all kinds of different things. So that's really where their focus is. It's not, really uplifting the Black community and other things like that. It's a lot of it is focused on LGBT agenda, and Patrice Cullors and the other founder, I can't think of her name, but they said that BLM is, their ideology is they're trained Marxist, and that's what's really behind a lot of the movement. And I know a lot of people who, felt bad and just donated to BLM. They didn't know that much about it. They didn't think too deeply about it. But time has passed. Like time has passed. Every time I see someone with BLM in their profile, I'm like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you to still to this day? It always cracks me up when I see BLM in a profile of like a person who's also like pro-choice. I'm like, bro, look up the disproportionate amount of babies who are killed in their race, and oh my gosh. um but people really started to push back about with BLM publicly when they looked at the What We Believe page, which they took down off their website. But you can still find this within different writings and different stuff that they push, that they still believe these things. But they wanted to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family, and they also wanted to dismantle cisgender privilege. So, and you could say, what's cisgender privilege? Cisgender privilege could be like, I go to a spa and I don't expect to see a penis, in the women's area. That could be cisgender privilege. Cisgender privilege could be, I'm dating someone, and I don't have to worry about having a conversation about not actually being the sex that they perceive me to be. That's cisgender privilege. I'm like, how do you dismantle things like that besides shaming people into dating trans people? Like, how do you dismantle something like that? And I'm not saying BLM stands for all those cisgender things, but I just want to give you some example. Maybe you could ask a BLM activist what BLM meant by dismantling cisgender privilege. So, going into prison and you're a woman and you expect a man not to be there, locked up with you. Those things are cisgender privilege, I suppose. So this is crazy to me. I don't know much about this writer other than the works, and I haven't read the books. I've just seen the films, and I was never crazy about them. I know I thought the Watchmen trailer was better than the Watchmen itself, but that's wild to me. Why? Absolutely wild to me. So before you I don't know, buy a DVD or something or stream it, just I guess think twice, because where it might be going. Oh boy, just nuts. Just absolutely nuts to me. Still after all this time, BLM, BLM. The cringe is strong with this one. Such cringe. Why not? I don't know. To help young black mothers who need financial assistance raising their kids. You know, poverty is a big indicator of people making some wrong decisions, you know. I don't think that's only it. I mean, poor just because you're poor doesn't mean that you're going to commit crime or something, but um, those things begin to add up. And a lot of women will go and have an abortion because they feel like it's too expensive. So why not a cause like that? You know, why not a cause like that? Why BLM? Why BLM other than to virtue signal? Because it's not because you really looked into the organization and their message and if it's what they even stand for is even accurate. Um, but if you, I mean, maybe believes that we should, dismantle or disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family and dismantle cisgender privilege. Maybe he believes that. I don't. Maybe someone should ask him. Oh boy, oh boy. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Please go to blacktees.com, check out different content on the website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you would like to, as far as different articles, I did post an article the other day about the evidence regarding Hunter Biden and his dad. There's definitely evidence that ties them together. People can ignore it, but it's pretty significant. So you can read that article, share it with people, and there's I also have like an article with evidence with Joe Biden, at the house or near the house at the time when he sent that text to his dad, same day, about, threatening the Chinese businessman. So plenty of evidence you guys can check out and share with other people. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. It costs a stream, it costs to run my website, all that stuff. So if you can support that way, I thank you very much. I'm a little foggy today. I don't know how foggy it looks to you guys, but I mean, my camera broke earlier this week, my webcam, so that's something I do need to get replaced and stuff. So if there's anyone, there's other things that I need to get and do and stuff. But if you guys can go that extra mile, I very much appreciate it when you guys can support in that kind of way. I know many of you have and have done super chats and other things like that. But and I know Bidenomics makes things kind of tough right now for a lot of different people. And it's about to get we're living in interesting times. UAW is about to go on strike and other stuff. So that'll definitely have a big impact on Michigan, where I'm from. But if you can support, I thank you. And a thank you to everyone who has. Check out different books as well and different merchandise that we have on blacktnews.com. And if you want to learn more about my books, if you go to the website, there's a banner at the top with my books. And they'll take you right to my book website. But you can just search my name, Christina L. Barr, Christine with a CH, on Amazon. But check out some of my reading this weekend. Since you're not me watching Black Tea, you might as well read a book. So again, God bless you guys. I'll try to get some more rest over the weekend. And I'm getting better. Obviously you guys can still hear it, but there wasn't any emergency, cut to black, get some tissue kind of thing going on. So I'm feeling better. Thank you guys for your well wishes and concern. It's I'm not like dying or anything. It's just when you're on camera, you don't always want to like not look your best and have to like runny nose and all that stuff. So thank you. I had the day off yesterday. I took the day off. So anyway, glad to do it today, and I'll be glad to see you guys on Monday. God bless and enjoy.